These shurim are sponsored in loving memory of Sorabas Leib, and Yeshaya ben Yisrael. The shur should be a schus for them, for the Yis Neshama, certainly Gan Eden, to all their mishpacha and all their descendants. Today, or I should say this week, is the week before Purim. And there's a lot of very vital, important information that a person can learn about Purim. One of the things that obviously is one of the centerpieces of Purim is Amalek, Haman. This week, Shabbos, is Parshas Zohar, which is a section of the Torah that we read that deals with Amalek, what God's or the Rebbeinu Shalom's attitude is toward Amalek, and of course what we as Jews should be doing about Amalek, and this of course is Parshas Zohar, and the Torah of course tells us Zohar Asher Osa L'Amalek. You need to remember what Amalek did to you. Okay. Now, I would like to start off with a statement that is very startling. However, when you think about it, as I will explain, you'll see it's true. If it wasn't for the fact that the Torah actually wrote that there was a war between Israel and Amalek, right? Before Mount Torah, they had Klal Yisrael, Jewish people, they warred with Amalek. If it wasn't for the fact that the Torah had written about that, I would have said that this is not true. This could never be. See? Doesn't make any sense. Or I should say, it's not understandable if you understand human nature. Why? Remember, but of course it did happen, obviously. The Torah says it happened. So of course it happened, but that does not in any way solve the problems of really why it really shouldn't have happened. What does that mean? Let's take a look. Question number one: why do nations go to war? Why? And the answer is no. Let's see. That was the Romans. Most of the, I might as well. Your point: nations go to war basically for several reasons. The Romans went to war for tribute. If they would conquer a nation, then they would force that nation to give them cash, right? It's a cash deal. That's what it's all about. They're not interested. Rome wasn't interested in capturing the barbarians of Germany. What do they care? You know? If they conquered them, they could tax them. And if they could tax them, that's cash coming into the coffers. And of course, they can support the empire. That's basically the reason why most countries go to war, when you think about it. So let's take a look. Amalek, why did they go to war with Israel? Let's take a look. Was Israel a military threat to Amalek? Of course not. The Medrash says that Amalek had to cross 5 borders in order to get to the Jews. That means that Israel was not a military threat to Amalek. I mean, they're 5 borders away, you see? So obviously they can't be a threat to Israel. So then why are you going to war with them? That's the first problem. Most countries go to war because they are under threat to defend themselves. It's called security, right? That's in many ways a major reason. But Amalek was under no threat by Klal Yisrael at all. They had to go over many borders in order to capture, in order to war with Israel. So clearly then, this can't be a reason why Amalek would go to war. Second idea, well, maybe Amalek went to war because of ideological reasons, theological reasons. For instance, I mean, ISIS today, they war with the world because they believe, right, that jihad, which is their way of making sure that Islam will conquer the entire world, It's theological reasons, because they believe their religion is the only religion, whatever, and therefore they want the rest of the world to submit. So that's a theological reason that drives them. So what was the theological reason that drove Amalek? Do you know, I've heard said that people think that Amalek were atheists and the Jews were theists, which means they believed in God. So therefore Amalek was upset, right? That's not true. First of all, Egypt was filled with gods of Egypt. In fact, every nation in the world basically was religious. There was no such thing as atheism in those days. Atheism is a modern day invention. You know, it came about basically through Darwin. Once Darwin posited that it's possible to have the origin of species and the variety of species without having to come out to God, so to speak, what's called survival of the fittest, and so on. So therefore people said, well, what do we need God for? We can figure everything out. We don't need a creator, right? That causes everything. Nature in and of itself has its own causality, you see? But in those days, you're talking about antiquity. We're talking about something that happened 3,300 years ago. Every nation was religious. They all believed in their gods. Avodah Zarah was rampant. So if that's the case, why would Amalek fight with Israel? Israel believes in God. You believe in God, or gods, whatever. But there's no atheism here that they can say, we want you to believe in our gods. No, it wasn't about that. So that second reason of ideology or theology is not true. Why would Amalek fight them? Third idea. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to make a war? Remember, okay, it cost the United States to make a war in Iraq. Remember the Iraqi war where the United States entered against Saddam and so on, you know? It cost them $1 billion a day to make war in Iraq. You have any idea how much money that is? Why? You have any idea in terms of the supply lines? You gotta supply, if you're gonna go through 5 borders, you gotta supply your army with food, with everything necessary to get to the enemy, right? That's a fortune of money. And remember, in the old days, you know, if they were in a civilization, so then the army would take over the local plantations and just rob the food. But remember, it was a desert, not a desert, it was a wilderness. There's no plants really growing in the wilderness. So therefore the question is, how do they supply their troops? Well, they took along. Do you have any idea how much money that costs? So if there's no military reason, and there's no theological reason, or ideological reason, correct? So then why would they make a war when it cost a fortune? Even in those days, it cost a fortune to feed people, to buy armaments. Third idea. Fourth idea. The Jews had just wiped out Egypt. Egypt was the greatest nation on earth, right? Before that, you had Tutmosis, and then you had Ramses. These were the top of the line. You know, they fought. I mean, they fought wars. They're the greatest nation on earth, Egypt, for thousands of years. Amazing how long the Egyptians lasted and so on, right? Well, if the Jews just wiped out Egypt, whether you want to think it's their God, so you certainly don't want to fight with their God, or if the Jews themselves did it, I mean, without getting into how they did it, you're not going to make a war, you know, with a guy that just wiped out. I mean, really wiped out. You know, Kriya Samson destroyed the army, and the plagues wiped out all the crops and the economy. So, in other words, they made Egypt into a basket case. Why would you want to start up with this kind of a nation? You see, makes no sense. See, fundamentally, it's a suicide trip, right? It's really a suicide trip. If the Jews are that powerful where they can wipe out Egypt, then it's suicide to make war with them. Fifth reason. Besides the fact that it's a suicide trip, okay, we also have the fact that there are 2.4 million Jews that left Egypt. Remember, there were 600,000 males above the age of 20. If you add their wives and their 4 kids, so at least 4 in a family, 4 times 600,000 is 2.4 million people. How in the world? That means Amalek has to have an army of hundreds of thousands of people to war against a nation that's 2.4 million people. You see? And just the males alone above 20 are 600,000. So did Amalek have that many people, really? And even if they did, do you know what it costs to support 100, 200,000 warriors? Come on. Makes no sense. There's no motive. They're not able to do it. It's a suicide mission. What's happening here? Got it? Illogical. And then there's one more idea, one more problem. You know, throughout history, there are a lot of people that hate the Jews. I mean, you know, the Jews are very familiar with hatred, different guises, right? So the question then is, there are many nations that hated the Jews. So then why does God hate Amalek so much? I mean, in no other nation does the Bereshit say, "Mochei timche zech Amalek." You will wipe out man, woman, and child. That you cannot. You have to wipe out the animals because a guy can't say, "Hey, that ox used to belong to Amalek." Oh, no good, because you're mentioning and reminding people that there was a nation called Amalek, right? You have any idea what kind of a nemesis Amalek has to be to God? Why? They're not the only nation that killed the Jews, that hated the Jews, that destroyed the Jews. This has been going on for 3,300 years, right? So what does Bereshit want from Amalek? Why did he pick them? He should have said you should wipe out everybody. Sounds like Islam, doesn't it? You know? But the Bereshit doesn't say that by any other nation, just by Amalek. What's the yichus of Amalek? Yeah, it's true he was an anakel. I hate to say that. He was an anakel of Esau, because Esau had, what's his name? Eliphaz, yeah. And Eliphaz had Amalek, you know. So, you know, so not only that, why didn't Amalek at least have a yichus? Hey, my grandfather is Esau, right? And Esau is the brother of Yaakov. So I have a yichus. But the Bereshit didn't take that into consideration. He's going to wipe out their name as a zecher forever. And not only that, the Bereshit says, right, that my kiseh is not filled, it's not complete until they're wiped out. It means God is taking it personal. You see, it's not because, well, the Amalek is starting up with my people, the Jews. Nah, it's not that. The Bereshit says, it's me. It's a personal vendetta against Amalek. Why? You know, it would make sense when the Bereshit says, hey, listen, you're destroying my people, my children. It doesn't say that, right? Ki yod al case ko. Their hand is against the throne of God. This is a personal war, you know? They're starting up with me, not only Klal Yisrael. What is that? They're starting up with me, right? Everybody hates the Jews. What is this personal, incredible animosity? And you know, and we know what the worst thing in the world is, to get on the wrong side of God. You do not want to get on the wrong side of God. You know, there's just no way out of it. Problematic. What's going on here? You see, you know, in other words, clearly there's something unique and special about Amalek. Clearly. But to such an extent where it's hard to believe that they made war with Klal Yisrael. You know, these questions have to stare you in the face and say, what's going on here? But we know that there's something special about Amalek. They have earned the distinction of the complete hatred, kavyochel, of the Bereshit, more than any other nation that exists. Why? You should know one thing. This is not an easy question to answer. It sounds, because the problems really are devastating. You know, they're very heavy problems. You know, it's not easy. I've heard different shurma people thought that, yeah, because Amalek is Apicurus. A lot of this stuff is nonsense, really, you know. You need to understand what is the problem here and why they went to war. Really, why they went to war. Okay. In order to understand Amalek, we need an introduction. We need an introduction about man's nature, human nature. Okay, so I'm going to make certain statements which are very interesting, but they're all very true. I'm trying to explain it. Man, a person, is always thinking about one of three things. I mean, there are many thoughts that occupy his head, but there's three things that he's thinking about, although he never really admits it to himself. There are people that think that they are God. Then there are people that say, I want to become God. And then the rest of the population is how to overthrow God. You see, it's always about God. Why? Notice, where do you see this? Okay. Who wanted to become God? Adam Rishon. The Nachash comes over to Chava, and she repeated the argument to Adam, and he knew exactly what's going to get her going. He said, V'yisem kelokim, you'll be like God. That's what he said. Why did he tell her that? Because obviously that was the attraction. She wanted to be like God. Or else why offer that? There's no drive, it's no temptation. Clearly there was a drive in man to become God, you see. And that's why I used that as an argument. V'yisem kelokim, and you'll become like God. What? No problem. You see that tree? He ate from the tree. Rashi brings down, that was the argument. He ate from the tree, right? And as a result from eating from that tree, he became God. It is the tree that is the force of the universe, not God. You see, that's what the Nachash's argument. So obviously, if you eat from that tree, you will become God. Wow, that's incredible. So Adam and Chava want to become God. That is a profound psychological drive that man has, and I will explain why. The second, right, is man thinks about overthrowing God. Who did that? Migdal Bavel. There's a whole society, can you believe this? A whole society gets together, right? And of course it had to take a lot of coordination, right? It had to take social skills to get all the people motivated. They had to collect a lot of money. It was an incredible program. It was an endeavor to do what? To kill God or to neutralize him, whatever they wanted to do with God. They clearly wanted to overthrow him, right? Wow, and we're not talking about two guys. There's a whole society there. That was the society. There was nothing else, basically, right? Eretz Shino. So what do we see? It's that one guy, if one guy has a delusion, he's sick. You could write off one guy having a delusion. Delusion is a false belief, right? He's a sick guy. He's got psychological problems, right? But you have the whole society thinking about that. This is called human nature, not a psychological problem. Although maybe that's the same thing. Okay? So we see, therefore, this is a reality. Okay. And then there are people who think they are God. Fortunately, it's rare. Who was that? For instance, R.A.Y. Pharaohs of Egypt believed they were gods. In fact, that's what the people believe, that they believe that they are God, or a physical manifestation of God, whatever you want to explain. So clearly, and we're talking about R.A.Y., the whole nation accepted the fact that he is God. I mean, this is part and parcel of human nature. Question is why? Why does a guy think about this? And you can say, well, I don't really think about this. Not true. The reason why you don't think about this consciously, because you know that you can never do it. But if you ever thought you could do it, I guarantee you'd line up with the rest of the people. That's why nobody really thinks about it. I am God? Nah, come on. I have too many limitations. But if a guy thought, if I give you $50 billion, believe me, that's the next way of thinking that I am God. If you have $50 billion to your name, and there are people that have that, it takes a lot of willpower not to think that you are God, obviously. Becoming God, everybody would love to become God. Can't. So you dismiss it. But if there was an inkling of reality, you try it. And the same thing with overthrowing him. That's why you really never think about it consciously. But you always entertain the idea. And the one who is wise will always know. That's where Gaiva comes from, as we'll see. Why does man have a propensity for arrogance? Why? Why is it so hard to solve? Now let's go into the concept. The problem that we all have, although it's interesting, is that we are born as infants, an infant. And when we are born, believe it or not, as our brains develop, we get the distinct feeling and idea at a primitive level that we are helpless. And we see that. We can't do anything for ourselves. You know, the mother or father's got to come and diaper the kid, and that's a busha chalima, you know, right? They got to come and feed the kid. They got to pat the kid down, you know, burp the kid, you know. The kid can't even burp on his own. You know, what can you say? What can this kid feel about himself when he's completely helpless? So what happens is the psyche begins to develop an idea that I'm really nothing, really a zero, you see. So we early on develop an intuitive inferiority complex because we are inferior. Not that we're inferior, because all infants are inferior, but what we do is we personalize that belief, and that stays with us throughout our entire life. And therefore, we're always trying to prove that we're not inferior. You see, what happens, the problem is that the unconscious never grows up. And when you entertain a delusion or a belief as an infant or as a child, it never leaves unless it's actively redressed. So therefore, most people, everybody in some manner is always trying to what's called assert being. He needs to prove he's somebody. Notice? And there's all kinds of things you do. You see, we're always trying to prove we're somebody, not a nobody, a somebody. And that never leaves us. So what we do is we have all kinds of ways of getting out of this mess. So when we're arrogant, what arrogance really is, it's a denial of the real feelings that we're really nobody, you see. And arrogance is just a way of remedying that. That's basically what it is. Because we cannot we cannot stand the fact that fundamentally we are limited, because we're really helpless in many ways. And even when we grow up as an adult, we're still helpless. You know, we got a boss that tells us what to do. Then we got a wife that tells us what to do. Right? And not only that, we need food to survive. We need money. There's so many things we need that we can't survive without. So this feeling of really, well, maybe you're nobody, never leaves us. So we always have this perpetual feeling of inferiority, inadequacy, and so on, that we're always trying to remedy. And the remedy is to deny or to compensate, you see. So feelings of arrogance is really a denial of the feeling that we really have, which we really developed ultimately because it took so long to grow up, you see. Now, it's funny, Adam Rishon, he never was a kid. Where did he get his inferiority complex from? You see? But Adam didn't have an inferiority complex, really. What he had was a rational adult decision. Hey, I'd love to be God. Why? Because Adam was created on the sixth day. He looked around and he couldn't fool himself and say, well, I created everything. I mean, he wasn't delusional, you know? So what he did, he says, boy, I'd love to be the guy who did this. You know? Why? Because that means that I will be independent of anything. I will be my own master, you see, even if I don't feel inferior. But I do recognize that I have limitations, you know? But therefore, being God means I can remove all dependencies, all limitations. So really, it's an adult rational decision, you see. So this feeling that we have always stays with us, you see. And therefore, that provides us with an incredible dilemma. What's the dilemma? I will tell you. All of us have this universal dilemma. The dilemma is, wait a minute, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Do you know how hard it is to accept authority? Nobody wants to accept authority. We rebel against authority intuitively. We have to abide by it, right? Because, especially if they pay the bills, you know what I'm saying? But deep in our heart, we resent anybody limiting what I want to do. Nature. Why? Because if somebody tells me what to do, that is proof that I'm nobody. That's the problem. We don't want things out there corroborating that I'm nobody. And a guy giving us money, or with the fact that I have to be limited and do things to be able to struggle to survive, and so on, right? That's proof that I'm a nobody or that I'm inferior. We don't want to feel that. You see, we want to deny our feelings. So therefore, we are led into a terrible dilemma. What's the dilemma? The dilemma is this. We believe in God. Hey, but wait a minute. God is telling me what to do. I don't want this. I don't want God telling me what to do. We rebel against the mitzvahs. You see it in the Torah that a person is always being moirid in mitzvahs. The Moshe says in Vorim, right? And you will build houses, and you'll have sheep and possessions, and you'll be a chalta v'savota and Vorim in the Ekev, right? And the Omer bilvovecha koicha v'oitza miyodi. I did it because we always want to believe we're somebody. So therefore, deep down, we don't want to do mitzvahs really, because when we do mitzvahs, that tells us that what? That you're nobody really. You're not what you think you are. You need devotion to survive. We don't want to feel that way. So the question that becomes, we have a problem. How do we believe in God at the same time and overthrow him? What do? We have to believe in God, let's assume, because we're Maminim. But really, we don't want to do his mitzvahs. You see? Think about this. Every mitzvah in the Torah interferes with your joy. It's a funny way of looking at it, right? Imagine a guy in Shabbos, right? He doesn't want to stay home, make kiddush. He wants to go to the beach, right? Or he wants to go out into a restaurant, entertainment. He wants to, put around his garage and build new things, whatever he wants to do. You mean I have to sit here? I can't do lamites malachas, right? I mean, come on, I gotta make kiddush. I gotta have, eating is fine, but there's so many ways. And then I gotta sit and learn. Come on, I want to enjoy myself. Shabbos realistically, it's an interference. Of course, it's a mitzvah, but it's still an interference, and it's made to be an interference. That's purpose what the Rosh wants. You're walking in Yerushalayim, usually used Fifth Avenue, in New York, right? And all of a sudden you haven't eaten all day, right? And this restaurant, you smell the steak that's coming out of the restaurant. And you say, wow, I'd love to eat this stuff. But he said, wait, this is not kosher here. It's hard to believe there's not kosher restaurants in Yerushalayim, but, right? And I said, wait a minute, I can't eat this stuff. It's treif. Well, why not? I want to eat this stuff. What's the problem here? It's healthy, it's protein. What's the problem? But you can't. So therefore, the whole law of kashrus is an infringement on my desire to eat anything I want. In fact, all the mitzvahs in many ways are infringements. Fine, they're mitzvahs. But deep down, right, we would love to throw it off and do whatever we want. And there's a very profound principle that comes out of this. But right now, I'm telling you what's deep in a man's heart. And that's what the Moshe says. Your matabil vovecha, in your heart. Yeah, you don't verbalize this, but it's deep down in your heart. You say, what? And your heart will go, right? And you'll say, it's my cause, because everybody wants to believe that they're a cause, and therefore that they are independent, you see. So man has a terrible dilemma. How do I believe in God and do whatever I want? Seems to be contradictory. Got it? This is the setup. So how does man solve the problem? Yes, mankind solve the problem. Leave it up to mankind. Don't worry about man. Mankind is brilliant, and they solve the problem. Would you believe this? In 10 different ways. Talk about hallelujahs. But I want to tell you something which is shocking. Each way that they solved it is nothing more than one of the religions of this planet. That's right. The religion is the solution to neutralize God. Let's take a look, okay? Let's take a grand tour of the religions of man. It's astonishing what they've done. Then you begin to understand Amalek. Okay, so what's the first way to get around this? Atheism. I don't believe in God. I don't believe a God exists, right? That's atheism. So that's a solution. Why? Because I don't believe he exists. I can do whatever I want. There's no problem here. There's no boss. There's no authority over me. Okay. Atheism is a little hard to believe, right? Because you have to be an idiot to be an atheist. Why? Because the world has such complexity. It's not the design. It's the complexity of the world that is beyond any calculation ever made. It's just incredible. I always like to tell the story if you want to understand how complex this world is, right? I don't know if I have the time. Okay. Huh? Talk again. Yeah. Oh, I told you. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, atheism. Okay, so a guy can't be an atheist, right? It's too hard, really. It's never is an atheist, because it's really a sheker. You can't be an atheist. But you know what you can be? You can be an agnostic. I don't know if there's a God. And until he talks to me, I don't have to do anything. You see? I'm waiting for him to talk to me. Then I'll know who he is. Then I'll listen to him. Right? And we know God's not about to talk to him. So his whole life could be spent doing whatever he wants. I see. Wow, he's laid down a certain condition that this is phenomenal. You see, so it's called agnosticism, and a lot of people are agnostics. They say, hey, look, I'm not saying there is no God. I don't know if there is a God. I don't know. So like I say, when he'll come and knock on my door, then I'll know who he is. Meanwhile, as they say in Yiddish, guten Tag, and that's it. You can do whatever you want. Okay. But agnosticism, not the greatest thing in the world, so we come to ideology number 3. What's ideology number 3? Aristotle. Of course there's a God, but God created everything, and then he walked away. He had nothing to do with us. Wow. He said, I create you and the whole world. Have a nice time. And he left. Where he left? I don't know. I don't explain that. But he left, right? So it's incredible. He left, so hey, I can do whatever I want. That's Aristotle. Aristotle believed that God created the world because you need a first cause, whatever. And then he walked away. He doesn't intervene in the affairs of man. And we know, well, Judaism, of course, knows that's not true because the first Aseret HaDibros, that's the count like Aristotle. I am right, I'm the Lord your God that is taking you out of Egypt. Hey, wait a minute, I thought you don't intervene in man's behavior in the history. Well, obviously he does. But anyway, so Aristotle is number 3. What a cop-out. Great. Okay, it's hard to believe that God invented and just walked away from the whole deal, right? So we come to idea number 4. What's idea number 4? Oh, wait a minute. Of course God created the world. And he intervenes, but God's limited. He doesn't know everything. He's not omniscient. He doesn't know everything. So therefore, if he doesn't know, I can sin, and he's not going to know about it anyway. So why I got to worry about it? You see, who believed that? Bilam. When the Baruch said, who are these guys outside? If you remember the Torah, right? So Bilam said to himself, that's very interesting. Bilam chapped immediately what the significance of that was. That means God doesn't know everything. Wow, what an out. It's an exit. It means I could do what I want because God doesn't know everything, right? And therefore, whatever, if he knew everything, that's problematic. See, so that's the concept that God is not omniscient or he's not omnipotent, you see? And there are people who believe this, that God is limited. And therefore, okay, so he's whatever he can do, but he's not omnipotent, which means he can't do everything. He's not omniscient, which means he doesn't know everything. And he's not omnipresent, he's not all over. He's not here. He's somewhere in his own palace in the Beis Hamikdash, right? And that's where he stays. So he doesn't see what I'm doing here. I can do whatever I want. You see? So what they've done is they've limited the Ribono Shel Olam, and therefore they can now, what's called that, they can eat their cake, have their cake and eat it too. That's a 4th strategy. You see? Then there's a 5th strategy. Wait a minute. Of course there's a God. But there are 2 gods. There's a God of good and there's a God of evil. Right? And they're both equal in power. The Satan is equal to God. That's called Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism believed in 2 gods. One was a God of good, and the other is a God of evil. So guess what? I'm going to be a chassid of the God of evil. I do whatever I want because he's going to protect me against the God of good. It's brilliant. You see? We begin to notice that these are all strategies that cut out. That I can believe in God and do whatever I want. Okay? But we're not into Zoroastrianism anymore. So then we have the 6th strategy, which is called polytheism. Many gods. Now Greece had 50 gods. It was astounding, and each one was doing their things. But the beauty of it all is that since there are so many gods, there's so many shittas. So what you do is you do like Kuli Beis Shammai and Kuli Beis Hillel. You take the lenient views of Beis Shammai and only the lenient views of Beis Hillel, and you can do whatever you want. So therefore you say, I got 50 gods. So I can take the easy way out. I can navigate between all the gods and just pick out the easy stuff. Those things which coincide with what I want to do, and I'm okay. That's what polytheism does. It allows you to navigate gods, do whatever you want, because we know 50 gods, they're never going to agree on everything. They're always going to disagree in some way. Okay, I'll capitalize on the disagreements. See, that's the beauty of polytheism. You thought it was just believing in many gods. No, it's a strategy to avoid, to compromise and neutralize God. But number 7, many gods, come on. So number 7 is another way, freedom. Number 7 is when you say to yourself, wait a minute, I really want to murder. I want to kill people. I'm an angry guy. You see? I'm an angry guy. Right? Just give me the gun. I'll show you how to use it. Right? But wait a minute, I can't kill people. God said no. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put in the mind of God in his statement that he commands me to kill. Oh, wow. So it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. You know, there's a mitzvah, to imitate his ways. That's exactly what they're doing. My God says I should kill. I'm going to imitate that and kill. Who is that? Islam. That's what Islam is. What they've done is put in these incredible, terrible things that their God dwell. You got to kill the Jew. You got to kill the infidel, right? You got to kill anybody, and you will be the boss. Then you can really kill everybody. You see? But that's what Islam is. It's a religion where they've made their God, right, into the Eight Sahara, into the Satan. What kind of business is this? So what's the problem? What a strategy. It's brilliant. Because I'm a tzaddik if I kill. Adrabah. You know? Because I'm doing God's will. Right? Okay. So that's number 7. That doesn't wash over that well. You know? So you come up with strategy number 8. I can't make God evil. So you know what I'm going to do? It's not God who's evil, but it's the avodah that's filled with vice and sin. You know, there are many religions that have their worship ceremonies are ridiculous. Like Baal Peor. You know, Baal Peor were made to worship this. It's almost embarrassing to say. You know, when they had to relieve themselves, right? The long way, not the short way. They did it in front of their Beis Hamikdash, in front of their idol, because that's how you worship Baal Peor. Excuse me, what are you doing? You know, you're going to relieve yourself in front of your God? I mean, is this what you want to show him? This is what you serve him? Yeah. The question is, what kind of logic is that? Because obviously, if this is what you can do in front of your God, you can do much worse things. You know, if you're already down to excretory functions, right? So you can do anything. You know how degrading that is? You know? These are incredible rationales. So what they did, and then there are many religions, you know, what do you call it? It's certainly in the olden times, you know, where there are many. Zimo was part of the avodah, you know, whatever they call it, Vestal Virgins, whatever they want to name you call it. The Zimo was part of the avodah. You see, and so what they did is they made the avodah tumah. So therefore, they're doing a mitzvah. You see, so that's an 8th strategy. It's incredible. Where they can do whatever they wanted. They just simply said, this is the tzivoy. Not that God is this way, but I'm mitzvah to do this. Oh, wow. Right? Number 9. Another brilliant strategy. Well, you know, it's true. God gave a lot of rules and regulations. But even God realized that he's wrong. So he changed his mind. In the beginning, he gave the Torah, but he realized it's just too hard. He made a big mistake, you know, and therefore he changed his mind. So he abrogated the entire law of Moses, as they say, and he gave a New Testament. What does that sound like? It's Christianity, you know. God changed his mind. Forget about the Taryag, right? Just believe that so-and-so gave his life for mankind, which is called grace, and that's it. You're okay. Wow. The whole Torah, you know, so it's funny because in Chabad, it says in Mishnah and Makkos that Bo Habakkuk, I think it's Habakkuk, that came and he made to our mitzvah achas. You know, your faith. You know, these guys did the same thing. They took the whole religion, threw it all out, and just said, just believe that this guy gave his life for you, you know, so you can atone for the sin of Adam, the original sin. What kind of nonsense is that? But that means God changed his mind. And then, of course, the Jews wouldn't accept it. So what he did is says, okay, but the Goyim accepted it. So therefore, the base Yisrael now went from the Jews to the Goyim. You see? And so on. And of course, our Mashiach isn't the one. It's their guy's the Messiah. And so on. You see? God changed his mind. What a strategy. A strategy. It's incredible. So that's strategy number 9. That's Christianity. It's a major religion, isn't it? 2 billion Christians on the world that follow this belief system. And then I'll give you the 10th strategy. What's the 10th strategy? This really is what's called a doozy. A doozy means it's just beyond belief. The brilliance, whoever thought this up. Okay, what's the problem? The problem is this. You do a sin, you got problems. Why? Because, hey, God doesn't want sin. That's the whole point. God says no, and you say yes. But you know it's bad news because God's going to come after you. So that's a problem, right? So what do? Oh, you need a kapora. You need tshuva, you see? But the problem is, only God can accept your tshuva. So along comes a religion that says, no, the priest can accept your confession. You see? And if you confess to the priest, he can actually give you a kapora. He's God's emissary. Now, we know, since the priest is human, right, he can be bribed, right? You say, okay, well, we need some money for the congregation, right? $100, you got a kapora. Yeah. Incredible. He forgave you because he was sheikhad. They're all full of sheikhad. And not only that, the priest tells the guy, listen, we're running a special today. If you give me $150, right, I'll forgive you for 2 sins. 2 for the price of 1. Got a special today, right? But they were brilliant. They did something even better. The priest said to the guy, listen, I can forgive you, right? Give me $100 for the sin you did, fine. Give me another $100 for a sin that you will do in the future. So you're gonna have a retroactive kapora. It's unbelievable. But they did that. That's called an indulgence. So what happened? Finally, they woke up. Luther went crazy, and he went, that's why Protestantism protests against Roman Catholicism. He said, what kind of nonsense is this? You want to pay for a future sin? What kind of a mockery is that? You see? But it goes on. I mean, I don't know, today with the church, maybe they got, you know, they became embarrassed. That's why the church was the richest institution in the Middle Ages. You know, because the guy said, okay, you know, in the next month, I'm gonna knock off 1,000 sins. How much? 50 grand, right? And forget about the next month. You can sin to your heart's content for the next year. It's called an installment policy. Sounds funny, but that's exactly, looking at this as mankind. I just give you 10 strategies how to neutralize God. It's called the Great Compromise. This is how they did it. Where the religions itself incorporate an exit, a compromise. Got it? Now we understand something very important. Along come the Jews. And the Jews come along and say, wait a minute. There's only one God. This God is righteous, just, right, virtuous. That's it. Not only the God, this God is only one God. He knows everything. And so what do we do now? We can't compromise with God. We cannot neutralize Jewish God. Therefore, Judaism is the most dangerous religion ever known to man. It has no exit. That's the problem. Take a look at Avraham Avinu. Why did they hate him so much? Okay, so he busted up a couple of idols. So what's the big deal? Just make a couple of more. I mean, just a manufacturing process. That's all it was. You know what I'm saying? So what do you want? What do you want? Why take this man, throw him into the furnace? You know, okay, so give him patch. Give him a couple of makas. You know? I mean, it's not like there's a loss of God. Just make some more. You know why? Because Nimrod understood Avraham Avinu's belief is no exit. Bad news. Because Avraham Avinu says, 1, there's only one God, A. Number 2, all you guys are wrong. Most religions accept every other god except I'm worshiping at this guy, right? Judaism says there's only one God, not two or many, and everybody else is wrong. What do you mean everybody else is wrong? Where's the tolerance here? There's no tolerance. Not only that, but you need to serve God, not him serve you. You can't compromise. He has an absolute accountability because he knows everything. We're stuck. And Nimrod realized that. And therefore Judaism, which is the religion of R.A.Y, is the most dangerous religion or belief system ever known to man, because there is no exit, you see. And therefore we understand a very important idea. The Medrash says, or the Gemara, why was Har Sinai called Har Sinai? Why the mountain of Sinai? Because the Har Sinai comes from the word Sinah, hatred. Because from Har Sinai is when the hatred began. Why? Because Har Sinai was the tzivoy of God that was absolute. There was no exit, no compromise possible. So therefore the world hated the Jews. You should know one thing. The world doesn't hate the Jews. That's not the origin of anti-Semitism. The world hates God because he cannot be neutralized. The Jews are the ambassadors of God, so we hate these guys. You know, they hate the messenger. You see, but what they really hate is the Rosham. What do they hate about God? Because I cannot neutralize God. I can't compromise with him. I'm subject to his rule and his authority. And that makes me feel like a nobody. You see, therefore, Judaism is the exact opposite of every other religion in the world. And that's why the Jews are hated. That's why Har Sinai began the sinner of anti-Semitism. Because the Jews left the world, the goyim, everybody, with no exit plan. No ability to neutralize God. Bad news for the goyim, you see. It's a very important idea. Now that you understand this, you can begin to understand Amalek. Amalek understood this. He said, wait a minute. Of course we believe in God, you know, we believe in God, of course. Yeah, but we have our ways of dealing with God. We can handle him. You see, we know how to handle this being and so on and so forth. You know, we can believe in him, we can worship him, and then on the side, we can make money on him, or whatever we do, right? When we'll come the Jews out of Egypt, and what is this? They vanquish Egypt with a religion, a God that cannot be bribed, that knows everything, that judges everybody, and holds everybody accountable to a strict code of morality and ethics. What do? This is what's called in Yiddish an Amalek. It's a tragedy of immense proportions. That's what Amalek held. You see, so Amalek realized this, but Amalek was unique. Most guys, okay, hey, you're not going to start up with the Jews. Like everybody was afraid. It was started with a country. That's why nobody went to war with the Jews. These guys just wiped out Egypt. Amalek said, no, the Jews are the most dangerous people who ever lived, and their religion must be wiped out, even if we die in the process. Mesiras Nefesh, to destroy, not God, his sovereignty. What does that mean? The Jews are not a military threat, but they are really an ideological threat, you see. So they are willing to spend a fortune to try to destroy the Jews. Even though they know it's going to cost them a fortune, even though they know it's a suicide trip, it doesn't make a difference. We need to wipe out this type of religion that destroys us, ultimately. It makes us into wimps, gives us a conscience, right? And it makes us feel totally inferior and inadequate. That's what, and therefore, they decided to war against the Jews in the hope that even though they're destroyed, they don't care. So the concept of Amalek is a nation that realized what the Jews were, what the theology was, how dangerous it is for man, because contrary to the omnipotence or arrogance of man that compromises God, and they didn't care. The Mesiras Nefesh beat to destroy that religion. Very important idea. That answers all the questions. And here's what it also answers. Why does God hate them? You see, because Amalek believes in a God. Okay, it's not God, but that's the worst kind of God. Hey, you're an atheist, I'll deal with you. Because eventually you're going to wake up and say, I can't be an atheist, but you can tell me with this incredibly complex world that it all came through chance. It's impossible, right? I mean, the human brain has 100 billion cells. The human body has 100 trillion cells. You're going to tell me all this came through chance? Impossible, right? Somebody once said that the human brain is capable of administering 100 trillion cells. How? That's the equivalent of the brain administering 18,000 planets. And each planet has 4 billion people. That's what one brain can do. And that's what it does to the human body. And this came through chance? Come on. It's impossible. And the incredible thing is no neuron ever touches another neuron. They have synapses. Could you imagine 100 billion neurons that never touch each other? And they're all squeezed into this thing called a skull. The amount of synapse, that's the gaps, is numbers in the quintillion. There's 100 billion neurons, but the amount of synapses, which is why the human brain is almost infinite in its ability to know and remember, is a one followed by 30 zeros. Did you believe? And all this came through chance? Like what's his name said? I'd rather believe that a hurricane went to a junkyard, and all of a sudden, when it left, there was a Boeing 747 in the junkyard, right? Because of the hurricane going through all that, right? I'd rather believe that's more possible than to believe that the human mind or body or anything was created by chance. It's not conceivable, you see. So the Russian could tolerate Avodah Zarah. Eventually you wise up, fine, because at least you believe in a supreme being, even if you've compromised that. But to believe in me, right, and to compromise my sovereignty, oh no, that's making a mockery of me. You see, and that's why it says, Ki yod al kes ko. The hand of Amalek is against the throne of God. It doesn't say that the hand of Amalek is against God. It's against my kisei. Ki yod al kisei. Ko is against the throne of God, right? What do you mean the throne? Because the throne is the symbol of his sovereignty, his ability to command. So that's where the hand is against. They made a mockery of my ability to command because they're always neutralizing me. But not only that, they are moist nefesh to destroy my sovereignty. These guys have to go. That whole shita has to be destroyed. You want to believe in me? That's one thing. You don't want to believe in me? Fine. But don't believe in me and then make me look like a fool. You see, that's a no-starter. And therefore, they must be completely eradicated. You see. You know where you see this very much time? You see this in the Pasha. You know how many times it says in the Torah, right? Vayas Moshe kashetzivo Hashem oisoi. You notice that? And Moshe did as God commanded him. What's this? Why does it say so many times? Because that's what Amalek did. God commands, and they can neutralize God. They differ slightly so they can insert their own will. No, Moshe did exactly what the Russian wanted. Exactly. That's why it says so many times, because there was no compromise. The Russian Rabbeinu says, well, I know the Russian one says, but let me add some of my own creativity. Never did that. Or let me do something which make it a little easier to tolerate this religion. Never. Vayas Moshe kashet. It says so many times in the Pasha. Kashetzivo Hashem oisoi, and all Bnei Yisrael did exactly as God commanded. Exactly. Nobody neutralized the Bashlam. You see, and that's why it says so many times in the Torah. That's what Judaism is. It's a religion that is an exact prescription of what you must do. You cannot deviate. There is no strategy to neutralize God. There's just no way. And Amalek was the exact opposite, but even worse, they were moist enough to destroy the sovereignty of God. And therefore the Russian says, I cannot tolerate this type of belief system. They must be wiped out. Because I don't want mankind to even think that once they believe in me, they can neutralize me and play around with my sovereignty. You see, that's the concept of Amalek. And that answers all these questions. Why Moshe had to destroy them? Why they were, even though there's no military strategy, doesn't make a difference. Because the Jewish religion is the greatest threat known to man. It's amazing when you think about that. Now you can understand something incredible about the Megillah. Very hard to understand the Megillah. Why? I mean, here's a guy like Haman, right? He's walking in the street. I mean, this guy's the Grand Vizier. He's not a schlepper. He's a second in command of the entire world. Achashverosh has 127 dinas, right? And this guy, he's the Grand Vizier. He's a second in command. You know, if you think Biden is anybody, it's a schlepper compared to a Grand Vizier. You see? Because these guys have to abide by the Constitution sometimes. But a Grand Vizier, these guys have the power of life and death. And even if not directly, they're right under the king. So the question is this: hey, you're mad Mordechai doesn't bow to you. Okay, you're mad at Mordechai, fine, so kill him. What do you kill the whole people for? You crazy? Nobody does that. Besides, the Jews are tremendous contributors to tax. You know, so Haman, in order to get Achashverosh to do that, he had to kick in 10,000 pounds of silver, which is Stalin's estimate is worth $100 million. That's what it's worth. He was obviously fabulously wealthy, which obviously took advantage of his position. Hillary Clinton. But anyway, and so on, right? He said, long ago preceded her, right? But in any case, so just kill Mordechai. What do you want from the whole Jewish people? It's ridiculous. And I want to tell you something, Haman isn't an idiot. You can't be a Grand Vizier, be an idiot. You know, you gotta take care of the Medina, the country. What are you gonna gain by killing the Jews? Right? That's why he had to give Achashverosh $100 million, right? To placate him for the loss of income. That's why. Anyway, so that's the first kasha. Why kill everybody? Second kasha. When did he think about this? So he asked them. Mordechai refused to bow, right? So he goes over to his attendees. He says to them, "Who's this guy?" So he said, "Well, he's a Mordechai Yehudi." They all said, "Mordechai Yehudi? I gotta kill them all." Wait a minute, just kill him. Why all of a sudden when he said Mordechai Yehudi did he go bonkers? Right? Because that's what it says. It's after he asked, who Mordechai Yehudi, right? And that's when he went crazy. That's the second problem. Third problem. The Megillah starts off, Haman, right? Or Agogi. It gives his yichus. But the Megillah repeats his yichus many times. Why? We already know what his yichus is. That is Agodi and Amaleki, all this kind of, Ben Amdoso, Ben Agogi, the ganze yichus brief. Right? We didn't know that. Why do we have to say it so many times? Third kasha. The fourth kasha is even more bizarre. Haman walks over to Achashverosh and he wants to kill all the Jews. He goes over to Achashverosh and says, there's a nation that's amongst us, part of our civilization, nation. They're not like us, right? Their religion is different. They're just different people. They have a different religion, different belief system, right? So what should Achashverosh have said to him? Besides the fact, are you out of your mind? You know how much money you're going to cost me? But he neutralized that because he said, I give $100 million, right? Fine. But Achashverosh should have said something else. He should have said, are you crazy? I have 127 countries under me. Did you know that each one has its own language, its own script, and its own ideology? What are you talking about? The Jews are different. I got 127 differences. So what are you talking about? I mean, it's not like there was one country with a unified religion and so on. He had the whole world. So it doesn't make sense what Haman is telling him. You see what I'm saying? It's very difficult to understand. What did he tell Achashverosh? But now you can understand. Now you understand what an Amalek is, because he's a descendant. Haman takes a look at Mordechai, and he says, wait a minute, this guy doesn't bow to me. Really, he should. Why? Because if he bows to me, then I'm going to like him. If I'm going to like him, he may ask me a favor, and I'll grant it to him because I like to be bowed to. You see? I'm doing favors. This guy's not bound to me. It must be that he has some type of a belief where he cannot bow to me, even though it would benefit him, because his religion says don't bow to man. You see? That means he's placed his ideology above self-interest. But wait a minute. He doesn't have an exit strategy. Everybody else would have bowed to me because they have a way to compromise God. Mordechai should have said, God, I know you don't want me to bow, but shh, don't look. He's got to figure out some way to placate his God. You see? So Haman said, who's this guy that places his ideology above his self-benefit? Therefore, he doesn't neutralize his God. So they tell him, he's a Jew. A Jew? Wait a minute. Aren't the Jews what my ancestors tried to wipe out 500, 600, 800 years ago? Yeah, they never succeeded. I'm going to pick up their cause. I will do it because that's my Elder Zeta. They're my yichus. They tried to wipe out the Jews. They couldn't. I will finish it off. That's why I decided to kill Mordechai and every Jew. And that's why it tells you the yichus all the time. That he wasn't doing something for personal reasons. He was doing because that's what the yichus was. That's what his great-great-grandfathers, that whole nation wanted to kill the Jews. So I will just carry the banner and I'll finish it for them. You see? That's why. Makes sense. And he goes over to Achashverosh and says, oh, these guys are different? So why doesn't Achashverosh says, what are you talking about? I got 127 different nations. So Haman says to him, well, you don't understand something. All the other nations have religions that are strategies. They've all neutralized their gods in some way. We, the Jews, can't. They don't. So they are different than every nation on earth. They're different than Zoroastrians. They're different because they've never figured out they can't have a way to neutralize their God. So therefore, they are different than 127 countries, and they are the most dangerous nation in the world. You see, no problem. You just have to solve the problem of cash. Here's $100 million. You see, that was his argument. That Judaism is like no other religion on earth. There is no exit. Bad news. Now we understand beautifully why Haman did what he did. Because he was following in the footsteps. He picked up the banner, so to speak, of his progenitors. Very interesting. That's what's happening. That's why the Megillah is always talking about his yichus. That do not make the mistake and think that this guy's an idiot because he has a vendetta against one man. He's going to kill everybody. No. His vendetta was based on the whole sheet of Amalek, which he decided to pick up because he's an anicle of an anicle of an anicle. He's a great grandchild, and he will defend their shita. He'll finish the job, as they say. Got it? Now we see something also. Wow, it's fascinating. I've answered all the questions. You now have a profound understanding of human nature. Now you have a profound understanding of religions, because they're all exit plans, you see? And you understand what Haman is doing. And you understand why people hate Jews. Why Sinai was the big cause of the hatred. Because we gave the Bible to the world, and they've never forgiven us. Actually, they've forgiven us, they just hate God. And since we keep at it, they hate us. They're always reminded, you gotta watch it. Now, is there a modern day equivalent to this? Of course. Who is that? It's a very important concept. Germany. Do you know what happened in Germany? What's going on? You have to understand. Germany is Amalek. At least then it is. Now, there is no such nation as Amalek because they became assimilated. There's no pure Amaleki anymore. So then who is Amalek today that we keep talking about it? And the answer is the ideology of Amalek makes you an Amaleki. You don't have to be a descendant of Amalek. You just have to hold their shita. What's their shita? Exits. You see, we hate you because you don't allow me to express my arrogance. What is Germany all about? Superman, Nietzsche, Iber Alles, right? Blonde hair, blue eyes, right? The Aryan race. What does that sound like to you? Man's arrogance. Germans believed there was a superior nation, right? And all of a sudden, they encountered Jews. So Hitler, in he sits down in 1923, right? And he writes a book called Mein Kampf. And in that book, he explains why the Jews must be eradicated. Why? Because he said, because they have given the world a conscience. They have made us into wimps. He writes that. They've given us a conscience. They have introduced religion to us that we can't break through. We have a conscience, you see? They made us into wimps, weaklings. We need to destroy them because that's exactly the opposite of the Aryan race. At least Christianity gives you an exit. Jews have no exit. So Hitler writes that in Mein Kampf. You need to, and that's why he was obsessed with the destruction of the Jews. Who does that sound like? Does that sound like Amalek? You really have to hear why he is. In fact, he's probably a pupil of Haman. There's a whole code. I don't know if you're familiar with the code, and so on. But anyway, so what happens? So in 1945, the German generals, this is brought down in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer. It's a 1,000-page book on Germany, which I read many years ago, Benastory. Because I couldn't compromise God, I had to read Benastory. But anyway, he writes an incredible event. The German generals came over to him in 1945, Hitler, and they said to him, "We're losing the war, it's over for us. And you're dreaming of the Third Reich, a 1,000-year Third Reich? That's what you're dreaming about. Just forget it, we're not going to last another year." So Hitler said to them, "Well, what's the problem? German army is the greatest army on earth," and they were. German army was incredible. They had their blitzkrieg. They could walk in and just decimate anybody. They brought England to its knees. And if it wasn't for that fact that the Russians decided not to destroy England, and they deserved, why? Because they destroyed the ability of Jews to go to Eretz Yisrael with the white paper. So Russians said, "I will show you, you want to destroy my people, right? And you will not give them an escape to Israel. I will destroy you, but advla ad b'chlal." Yet Rahman is because they have other purposes. So Hitler destroyed them. Dunkirk, there were 5,000, I think 5,000 British soldiers trapped, and they would have been massacred if the American army hadn't saved them, whatever. So therefore, these are all Nisim. But if not for these Nisim, if Hitler hadn't turned around, he almost destroyed England, but instead he turned around and decided to go after Russia, he would have destroyed England. Without England, America probably would not have that, they wouldn't have a beachhead. And so on. There's so many Nisim, it's beyond belief what that war was. You saw the hand of God. And the one mess was Japan and America, right? How in the world did Japan fight America? Are they crazy, Pearl Harbor? Why introduce them into the war? First consolidate your victories in the Pacific and then fight with America, right? So they decided to bomb Pearl Harbor. Were they crazy? And Yamamoto, who was the German, the Japanese naval chief of the Navy, he says, what?
Admiral.
It was the admiral, whatever, right? He said, "You can't do this, and I only fear that you will wake up a sleeping giant, America, and fill it with a terrible resolve." And that's exactly what happened. Once they get going, bam, they destroy Japan. You see, why did they do that? Because they had no choice. The Russians took away their Bechira. He forced Japan to bomb America. Why? So America should be dragged into the war, and America, Esav, will save the Jews. That's a schus for Esav. Anyway, without getting into that, it's all hashgacha pratis. But the main idea is, so the generals walk over to Hitler and they say, "Hey, we're not making it." So he said, "Why not?" Because we don't have enough troops in the front. What's the problem? Because you're taking all the cars, railroad cars, to ship the Jews to the concentration camps, right? You're not leaving us any cars for the troops. So they said to Hitler, "Cut it out. Let's use the railroad cars to bring the troops to the front." You know what Hitler told them? "Shut them the leg." I don't care. What does that mean? That's a suicide statement. What Hitler said, that it's more important for me to destroy the Jews, not to waste 1 minute to destroy the Jews, than for the entire victory of Germany. That makes Hitler the greatest traitor of German history, because he could have won the war. Instead, he was obsessed with killing the Jews. But wait a minute, it was suicide, because they told him, "You don't cut this out, it's over." He said, "I don't care. What does it sound like to you?" Amalek. It's Mamish Amalek. I don't care if I go down in flames, as long as I can grab the Jew with me to go down with me in flames. That's Mamish Amalek. You see. And that shita never really ended. The only thing is that Hitler was a radical. He was at least honest. He had integrity. I hate to say that, but Hitler had integrity. He was honest with what he wanted to do. He said, "I hate the Jews because there's no compromise. They made us into weaklings, and we are the Aryan race." He was honest. He had integrity. He stood for the MS. You see, Everybody else is trying to hide behind, well, we really love the Arabs, and therefore you have to make peace. How do you make peace? You got to give them all your property. If you give me all your property, then they'll kill us all. Okay, man, don't forget about that. Don't worry about that. Kill you all. You know, we have enough graves in Europe to bury you all anyway. So what's the problem here? You see, they don't admit the fact that they hate the Jews. And the new form of anti-Semitism is, of course, anti-Israel. I don't think it's nonsense. Even many Europeans also recognize that. But it's the sheet of Amalek. Why? They hate the Jews because the Jews have no exit in their religion. And they've never forgiven us for making man a servant of God. That's the problem, you see. And therefore, there's the origin of all anti-Semitism, you see. But at least Hitler was open about it. He says, I hate the Jews for that reason. Everybody else is trying to hide it with social reasons, you know, also we really are for peace, you know, and therefore give up all your territory. You give up my territory, then Hamas will use it to bomb everybody. Well, don't worry about it. We'll protect you, sure. Like we protected Czechoslovakia and so on and so forth. The thing is, it's incredible how obvious these people are and so on. But therefore, you have to remember, this will never end. The difference between Amalek and all nations, and that's why God didn't say destroy all nations, just destroy Amalek, because Amalek is willing to die to destroy the sovereignty of God. And that was Hitler. Other nations are not willing. That's why they back off. You know, we don't want to get ourselves killed. You know, we'll deal with the Jews, that's all. How? By hating them and denying them throughout the whole Middle Ages. They denied the Jews everything, and they killed them anyway, left and right. And we know Europe was a slaughterhouse for 1,000 years, basically, you know. Fine, but they're not going to get killed. Amalek was Moshe Nefesh. Do you imagine what kind of mysterious Nefesh that was? To kill the Jews. At least they had integrity, you see. But that type of integrity, God says they must be wiped out, because that can never be tolerated. And therefore, when Amalek was overthrown, yes, on Purim, Haman was killed, right? That means Amalek was destroyed. Where's the remnants to that? Right? What does it say in the Torah? Kiyod al case ko. There are missing letters. Kiyod al case. It should be Kiyod al kisei. Their hand is against my throne. Kiyod al case ko. Kisei is missing an aleph, right? Because case really means kisei. It's missing an aleph. And ko is yud k. It's missing a vav k. So it's missing an aleph, vav, and hey, right? So what's the essential statement in Megillah? V'nahapechu. Who is aleph, hey, vav? That the aleph, hey, vav, which is missing in the Rebbeinu Shalom's name, was restored to the Shem. V'nahapechu. The who was nishapech from Amalek back into the kisei. You see, beautiful remez and so on. And therefore, the Purim has two essential ideas. It is the destruction of Amalek, you know, and other idea which I will talk about next week because that's a Purim shir and so on. But in any case, this is what we have to contend today. You see, in essence, the most difficult part of the avodah, I will tell you, is don't compromise God, because we all want to do that. It's in our hearts, really. You know, you have to face it. In the end, we want to do what we want to do. Yeah, we'll allow him some entry also. We'll also accommodate his will. But wait a minute, I gotta have my own input, right? And the Torah says, no, Vayas Moshe, Kashem Tzivu Hashem Oisoi, he did exactly what God wanted. There was no input of self, you see. Very important idea. And that's the most difficult part of the avodah. Is sure, I'll do the mitzvahs, but I need to put in my own creativity, which usually means to make it easier for myself. You see, he once said a beautiful word, Rav Shalom Shvadron, and I'll mention this, end with this. He said on Yom Kippur, you know, it says, "Forgive me, my Masha Osal Tov, that which you forbade, Itarti, I permitted." Well, that's a chet. You said no, and I said okay. But then it says, Umashe Itarto, and that which you permitted, Osalti, I forbade. So what? It doesn't make sense. I can understand if he said it's also you forbade it, and you said it's mutter, that's a chet. But if he said it's mutter, okay, so I asked it. Why is that a chet? He asked that kasha. And he answered something, beautiful answer. He said, because that's the concept of Amalek. What you permitted, I forbade. The I is involved. You see, no. If he permitted it, then you permit it, because that's the will of God. Don't come in because of your private needs, maybe ego needs, or whatever you're thinking about. The chumrah, so everybody's going to look at me, and I'm the chumrah. They'll think I'm a tzaddik gomer. I mean, whatever the needs are, don't tzaddik harbe. Don't be so. Cut it out. If he said it's mutter, it's mutter. Now, there is an inyan lefnim meshus adin. I'm not saying. But that lefnim meshus adin is because you love God, not because you want to have a self-input into the mitzvah. That's wrong. Ego has no place in the will of God. You see, love does have. Fine. You want to do lefnim meshus adin because you love God, that's not a problem. But if it's lefnim meshus adin because, hey, that's my contribution to the will of God, excuse me, I don't need you and I don't need your contribution. Just stick to the letter of the law if it's coming from your ego. You see? And for that, you need a kapara. Beautiful idea that Shalom Shadon said. I remember he said this over 50 years ago. I never forgot that book. He said it in front of the whole Lakewood. I was in Lakewood in those years. And then there was a dining hall. And it was like, 1,000 guys. And he said this idea, which is a beautiful idea, that the Avera wasn't that I asked what you mattered. The Avera is that I asked what you mattered, because it was the I involved. And that's it. Don't do that, because guess what? Once you insert ego, I guarantee you, if he asks something, then I will matter. I'll find a way around. Don't worry, and so on, because that's the beginning of the end. And so on, okay? So therefore, we now understand what Amalek is, who Haman is, the incredible Messias Nefesh. We understand religion is nothing more than strategies to compromise God. That's all it is, basically. In many ways, they just can't get it straight because they don't want to get it straight, because man does not want to serve God. And the problem is he has to admit there is a God, and that's a dilemma. If I admit there's a God, so who am I? If I am somebody and I ignore God, he's going to come after me. That's a dilemma. You see? So therefore, what I'll do is I'll admit he is, right? And I'll admit that he has a service, but don't worry, I know how to handle God. I'll come up with a strategy. That's Amalek, but Amalek did more than that. They're willing to commit suicide and spend hundreds of whatever they spent to go war, which is incredible, And the only ones who did that in modern history, when you think about it, is who? Is Germany. They spent hundreds of billions of dollars to make a war that Hitler knew he was losing. He didn't care. That's why when they got to a European city, the first thing that happened was that forget about the Wehrmacht, which is the army. The first thing is the SS went into the city, gathered all the Jews, and killed them. And then the Wehrmacht went in. Wehrmacht is the German army, and then they went in to take the city. And so the question, what is this? What is this obsession? You don't have that in history, you see, except by Amalek, where there's an obsession to kill every Jew. And you do that first. It's more important to kill the Jews than to take over the city, because they realize that the greatest enemy of the German is the Jew and his God. Forget about it. And therefore, whatever they could do, they would eradicate every Jew, you see. But it's just astounding what they did and so on. Because they didn't just kill them. They used every part of the Jew. They used his fat food or soap. Okay, that's the Xer of the version already. But once he decreed death on the Jews, which means he allowed the Germans to do it, then the Jews became completely bottled. Every part of the Jew was used for something. The fat for soap, the skin made shades, lampshades, the bones were crushed for fertilizers. It's like the Jew became a complete animal. You ever see an animal? You use every part of the animal, right? That's what the Jew ultimately became. That was the Gzeir, without getting into that. It's a whole different Hanoga and so on. But the essential idea is, we now understand what Amalek is, Haman is, why the world hates the Jews, and why you have to be incredibly weary against the world, It's not that I'm against the world. Will they stop the nonsense already? It's obvious what they want. They know the Arabs want to kill the Jews. Are they idiots? It says in the Quran, they can never give up that power to destroy the Jews, because the Quran says you must destroy the infidel. That's why the Arabs can never make peace, and they know it. So what are you forcing the Jews to compromise for? It's a death trap for the Jews. How dare you do that to a people that have given more things to the world than all nations combined? You have any idea what the Jews have contributed to the world? Somebody once made a list. It's cute. Okay, you don't want us? Fine. We're going to take back everything we gave. And the guy goes through a whole list. Yeah, we're going to take back the Salk vaccine. We're going to take back Hollywood. Hollywood, yeah, okay, that's okay, right? Because, Warner Brothers and Metro Goldwyn Mayer, all you, and so on, right? We'll take that medicine. Every year, somebody who always wins a Nobel Prize is always a Jew among them. It'd be physics or medicine or economics. It's astounding. The Jews number less than 1/4 of 1% of the world's population, right? Yet the Jews have won more than 1/3 of all Nobel Prizes. And everybody's astounded at that. I love the South Korea, because they realize that the reason why the Jews are so smart is because they learn Talmud. So they have translated the Talmud into Korean, and it's part of their curriculum. To learn Gemara. You believe this? You see? Because they looked at the Jews. How do they do it? How do they? 1/4. In fact, there are more Pashtun. There are 15 million Pashtun. That's the Taliban, right? That's the major tribe of the Taliban, right? There are 15 million Zulus. When was the last time you heard anything about the Zulus? And what are there, 40 million Jews? Yet the Jews are always in the headlines. Always. Zulus, what? There's something different about Jews. Why are they always in the headlines? It's astounding what goes on with the Jews. And the world intuitively knows that. And I'll just end with one very quick story. There was an Israeli, Israelis, when they finish the army, they need a break. So they go overseas, Well, I don't go to Thailand. And they go to, one guy decided to go to Africa. You gotta hear this, right? One guy goes to the, he said, no, I'm going to Africa, So he goes to Africa, he takes a plane, and, you don't want to go to Africa, one guy alone driving through the desert. Man, you mind? I mean, if somebody killed you, they would never know, because all the Schwarzes look alike anyway, right? You don't know who killed you and what, and you never identify, and so, right? Not that they all look alike, but you can't identify them, That could come out of the bush, stab you and walk away, and that's it, rob you, you're dead in the middle of the desert. The only usefulness you have is you're now food for the lions in the Africa, and so on, right? So this guy decided, he's going to Africa, right? So he lands, I forgot which country, some, whatever, real backwards country, whatever, He lands in the country, and he rents a car, or whatever he rented, a lorry or whatever, right? And he's on his way. He's about 20 miles out of the city, and he's in the wilderness. I mean, Africa's wilderness, basically, All of a sudden, he sees a little kid on the road. Look at the road. So he figures, I'll stop and give this kid a candy, He stops his car, lorry, whatever. The kid looks at him, and the kid runs away. In less than a minute, he was surrounded by African warriors with spears. In less than a minute, right? And one guy who knew little English, it's amazing, right? He said, get out of the car. And he's saying, it's it, it's over. I don't even have a Kaddish that somebody's going to say for me, right? He's in the middle of nowhere. If they kill him, nobody will ever know the difference. He disappeared, you see? So he gets out of the car, and they throw him on the ground. They throw him on the ground, and they bind his hands. I mean, it's the, right? And so on. Obviously, what they're going to do is kill him and rob him, whatever, So one of the guys says, hey, where you from? Whatever. So he didn't know what to say. Should I say I'm from Israel? Because he was an Israeli. Or should I lie? She says, no, listen, it's curtains for me anyway. I'll tell him I'm from Israel. He said, I'm Israel. He tells him he's from Israel. They stand back. They go over him, they cut his bonds, and they pick him up. So he's shocked, So he looks at them and what is this? So the chief, who knew a little English, says, you from Israel, right? You holy people, you Jew, you holy people. It's astounding. And they all left. It's like, what? It's a true story. So what this guy's shot, and this guy's a friar guy, right? He's shocked. Could you imagine he had to go to Africa to find the Hashivas of a Jew, right? A bunch of, like your primitive people, to find out he's Jewish. So he was stunned. He says, like, what is a Jew that these guys, like, they just walked away? And more than that, they like covered Gadol. You know what I'm saying? You holy nation, right? So he goes back to Israel to find out what is this story that I'm Jewish, and he registers, he enrolls in the yeshiva, and the guys are from He became a big Talmid Chacham.
How did they know?
Doesn't say how. Well,
the Africans, how did they know this?
Look, I want to tell you something. In the end, they're Christian missionaries. They probably have heard about the Bible. Word gets around, But it's just astounding, how you find, that the world recognizes there's something different about the Jew. So that either brings us covet or it brings us incredible hatred. That's in the end what it is. Great. So what Haman is, we have a really fundamental understanding of human nature, why the Russian hates them, and the whole concept of Amalek, the whole concept that you want to do the will of God, it has to be complete. Don't compromise God. Thank you.
Can we ask questions?
Yes, quickly.
Look around with the radical Islam and suicide bombers, and seems a lot like Amalek. Is there a connection there as well?
But it's no. Well, remember, but Amalek is strategy number 7. Well, they have put in the voice of their God, right, that you need to kill the infidel. Look, Islam is a warring religion. It is a religion of conquest. There's no such thing as any nation that lives with Islam. There's no such thing as equality. No such thing. Islam is either over you or under you. That's the only way they can exist. You see, that's why, and now they can't even exist among themselves. Islam always has had a caliph or a dictator. You see, so that's how they can be held in check. When Islam becomes a democracy, they go crazy. They war with each other. They kill each other. You see, that's their problem because they are a warring nation and they're interested in conquest. They think, of course. So what they've done is invested in their God the desire to kill all infidels, so that they can, deep down, to achieve an incredible sense of superiority. You see, one of the ways of corroborating this superiority is by killing everybody else, because obviously my God says kill them all, then I must be special. What lurks behind all this stuff is to compromise God in a certain way, to exercise your vengeance and ritzicha, tendency and so on, and to prove you're somebody. That's really what's behind a great deal of man's actions and so on.
They're still killing a lot more Jews than everybody else.
You what?
They're still killing a lot more Jews than everybody else.
Well, now, but they don't have the honor of having killed the most Jews. Rome and Christianity, right? I love Christianity. Christianity says turn the other cheek, right? But they forget to tell you that it's your cheek that they turn, not theirs, yours. It's one of the brutal religions ever known. Sure, for 2,000 years they've killed Jews. I would tell you a statistic, but there's no time. How many Jews they have killed? If you really want to know, how many Jews have they decimated? But the truth is that it's incredible. It's one of the most brutal religions ever known, Christianity. They have killed more people in their savior's name, whatever, right, than in all wars combined. Can't believe what what am I talking about? Pogroms, Inquisition, Crusades, expulsions. It's all Christianity. For 1,500 years in Europe, that's what they've been doing. And guess who the main victims are? The Jews. How many people died? The Crusades was nothing more than an excuse, right, to remove all debts that you owe Jews, right, and to kill Jews and take their property on the way to rescue Jerusalem from the Arabs, from the Muslims, and so on. It's a bloodbath. That's all it is. It's just an excuse to kill Jews. That's basically what it was. as an agav, but it was an important agav. It's an important side goal. It's to kill the Jews. They all did that. I mean, pogroms. How many times was the Catholic Church in cahoots with the guys, the priests, and so on, and so on? The Inquisition. It's incredible what those guys do. The Inquisition, something that was in 500 years, and then you have expulsions. The Jews were kicked out of every nation, from England straight across Europe. Why? Because they're Jews. Because you don't want to convert? Hey, we got to kill you, or throw you out, or whatever. What kind of a religion is this? And that's why when I look at the Pope, the gall of a man, the Pope, to say that his religion is a religion of peace, that is an absolute denial of 1,500 years of butchery at the hands of Christianity. If he was an Ish Emes, and he represents the religion, I'm not saying it's his fault, but you represent a religion that has killed more people in your guy's name than all wars combined. Millions and millions of people have been slaughtered by these guys. So you come along now as the Prince of Peace? What is this? What he really should do, really, if he was an Ish Emes, he would grovel. You know what grovel is? He would grovel at the foot of a Jew and beg their forgiveness. Not, oh, we forgive you. Or, you're right, we were pretty bad to the Jews. Really? What, is that the way you express yourself? He should grovel at the feet of the Jews and say, I cannot even begin to beg your forgiveness. Although he cannot do that, because a man cannot forgive him murdering some other guy. You got to go back to the other guy. What does that have to do with you? Imagine the guy kills mother, father, brother, sister, and then he goes to the last remnant survivor and he says to the guy, excuse me, maybe you forgive me that I just slaughtered out your family? He's like, are you crazy? Go back to my family and ask them forgiveness. They're the guys you killed. Excuse me. Makes no sense. But incredible, the denial of these people. And the ha'oza, the geos, where a man can stand up and say, I'm not blaming him, but he represents a religion that is one of the most evil religions that ever existed. And they finally woke up with what's the name, John the 20th, Pope John the 23rd, or whatever, and so on. They finally woke up and says, okay, we forgive the Jews. Oh, really? Thank you. How many Jews did you kill till we got your forgiveness? Right? Millions and millions of Jews would die because of your religion. That's what he should do. He should grovel at the foot of the Jews and say, I beg you to forgive me, and I beg you to intercede with God, because they recognize God as God. You see? That he should forgive us. Be a man that's Yosher, that the one who should forgive us, because we have sinned a terrible sin. You see? Why? I'm going to do this quick. Historians estimate that there were approximately, let's say, 10 million Jews at the time of Rome, 2,000 years ago. 10 million Jews. Historians also estimate that there were 25 million Chinese. How many Chinese are there today? 1.3 billion, right? So if there are 25 million, right, that's how many times? That's like 45 times multiplied, right? Why? Because 2,000 years. But wait a minute. If there were 10,000 Jews 2,000 years ago, how many Jews they? 14 million Jews? That's all? I mean, that's all they can reproduce in 2,000 years, another 4 million people? Of course not. Because they were wiped out. Really, the Jews should have the same percentage as the Goyim, right? We should have what? Not 10 million Jews. We should have 400 to 500 million Jews. You see? Where are they? Killed by Christianity, by Rome, but mostly by Christianity. It's astounding that they killed potentially 500 million people. Could you imagine if we had 5 million, 100 million Jews? You have any idea how many shuls there would be? 1 billion shuls, because every Jew has to have 2 shuls, right? Could you imagine, and Rabbi Gold, you would have no problem getting guys. There's hundreds of millions of guys not looking for yeshiva. How is it possible? And not only that, think about this, Jews go back 2,000 years before Rome, Rome Avinu. So we've got 4,000 years, and all we show for it is 14 million people? That's what the Christians did. Before them were the Romans. But the Romans never did it because of anti-Semitism. They did it for conquest, for cash, tribute. They didn't care because they had many nations under them. They only wanted cash, that's it. And they wanted to conquer. Christianity did it because of religion. You don't want to become Christian. You see, we will kill you because of that. And so on. How can they ever be forgiven? They can't. How can they? They can't. She says, no. And that is why, I'll tell you one thing. Why is there a third world nation? You ever wonder why? Most of the third world suffers. The US, they are first world nations. The US now is the only one. They are second world nations, like Europe, industrial. But most of the world is third world. They have dictators. They're poor. The whole Africa is poor. There's billion people after, right? South Asia, you know, a great deal of the world is really poor. Why? Because most people who come back are chayav misa, you see. Because they're chayav misa, because they're all gilgulim of all the guys that killed so many people. So they come back as third world, which is poverty. And the Gemara says that there are 4 death equivalents. Poverty, blindness, tzuras, and a woman who can't give birth. So what's the bunch going to do to the world? Not give them tzuras, right? He's not going to blind them all, and the women can't stop the women from giving birth, or there's no world. Makes them poor. So the poverty, the essence of a third world is it's primitive and it's poverty. That's the oynish of misa to the whole world. Got it? There you are. That's the retribution. It's not for nothing that there's a third world, because they're all Gilgulim coming back, and it's payday, as the Ron Shem says. And there you are. You see? Nothing goes untouched. It all comes home to roost, as they say. Anyway, this is the world that we live in, and I hope it gives you